Hello everyone, it's me Clayton. I just finished watching Bubble, the latest Netflix anime film that's directed by Tetsuro Araki, written by Urobuchi, has character designs from Takeshi Obata, and has music from Hiroyuki Sawano. Now, with that kind of dream team on display and animation from Studio Wit, you'd expect this to be a blockbuster film for the ages. But ultimately, if you came into this purely based on the staff's pedigree, then you might be a little bit disappointed. That's not to say that it's a bad movie, not at all. It just happens to be pretty underwhelming when it comes to a storytelling front, even though the visual side of things is as perfect as can be, and honestly has some of the most brilliant visuals that you'll see in any movie, either on streaming or in theaters when it comes to the animation. But let's get to the story, shall we? The story is about these bubbles that happen to fall onto humanity that happen to cause anti-gravity effects, and the city of Tokyo is encased in this huge bubble that happens to separate it from everyone else in the outside world. So these orphan boys decided to come together to use this isolated part of the world as part of their little parkour races. So they use parkour as a way to basically challenge each other and to try to get supplies from other teams. Our main character is Hibiki, who is the parkour ace of the Blue Blazers. And one day he happens to almost drown in the ocean, where he's rescued by a girl named Uta, who happens to see him as a prince of sorts, very similar to Hans Christian Andersen's Little Mermaid, to the point where they even reference it several times in the film. And the story revolves around her falling for Hibiki, while they also find out the true nature of what happened with these bubbles. Now, this does feel like a story that has a lot of interesting sci-fi concepts. It certainly does. But Gen Urobuchi is only one of the writers on display here, and while I'm sure he had a lot to do with the concepts of sci-fi and him giving the okay for all the things that happened in the film, I do think the other two screenwriters were more on hand for the story on display here, and unfortunately, the story is easily the weakest aspect of the film. Mainly because while it does have a lot of these concepts, it doesn't know what to do with them quite a bit. It feels like they had 3 or 4 different concepts for a movie that had to be smushed together, and as such, they don't feel like they do any of those aspects of the film particularly well. It tries to mix romance, action, sports, and a sci-fi story with a mystery, and all of those things feel underdeveloped. That's especially the case with Uta and Hibiki's connection. Uta almost feels feral at the start of the film, which ultimately only makes her sudden characterization all the more sporadic. And even then, she never really becomes that compelling of a character because you've seen her type in several of these movies. Same goes for Hibiki, where he basically just seems like the typical stoic lead, where the most interesting concept about him is the fact that he has an audio disorder. Has a hearing disorder. It has an interesting exploration as to how he got the hearing disorder and how it affects him, but when that's the most interesting aspect of your character, that's not boding well. And if the main leads aren't particularly interesting, the side characters are even worse, as they're basically just a bunch of cliches that don't get to develop beyond their archetypes. However, that's not to say the film is bad. The best aspect of the film is clearly the visuals. Tetsuro Araki clearly had a lot of pent-up animation that he wanted to use in the future Attack on Titan seasons, and if you've been missing Araki's style of direction, it's on full display when it comes to the parkour scenes. There's tons of great 3D camera work. You get to see a lot of the parkour stunts from up close to make it feel almost like an anime version of Dying Light, only without the zombies. It's a visual delight when it comes to anything related to the parkour scenes, which makes me wish that they were just the main part of the film. Why don't you just take out the love story and most of the other aspects of the film that don't work and just make it a parkour sci-fi film? That would have made it a lot better, in my opinion. But as is, it's decent, but clearly style over substance, and that's why Bubble is getting a 7.5 out of 10. See you next time.